So Sony has found themselves in a very interesting situation with PlayStation and the PlayStation brand. It's been something that I've been talking about a lot on the channel because I find it, perplexing that they seem to focus on things that their consumer fan base doesn't necessarily want, and then when they realize that they don't want what they are trying to put out there into the marketplace, you end up having all of these layoffs and studio closures and of course colossal failures when it comes to the money side of things. Now, one individual that I've blamed quite a bit for a lot of these decisions is indeed Herman Holst. I don't think Herman Holst is the right person for the job. He was a co-CEO of the company after Jim Ryan left the company, and it seemed like he just didn't have the best decision making. He was a huge fan of Concord. He thought Concord was the future of PlayStation, and he ended up buying that studio up and then putting a bunch of money into that game, and well, we saw the results of what happened with old Concord there. But last night, Sony has undergone a bit of a shift. There's been a bit of a power change, I guess you would say, within the company itself as far as who is doing what. And the title of this video kind of reflects that a little bit, because I feel like there's something that people are potentially missing out on with this. And if you look at it on just the surface level, you might say, well, I don't think that's going to happen. And maybe it won't. But I want to talk about the possibility because the groundwork is kind of there for something like this to happen. It's just you don't really realize it quite yet. So here's what happened last night when it comes to Sony. Herman Holst and Mr. Machino were both CEOs of Sony as far as PlayStation's division was concerned, Sony Interactive Entertainment. They had kind of different roles on what they focused on, but they were co-CEOs of the company. Now, as of last night, Herman Holst is still involved as far as the head of Sony Interactive Entertainment, but he's no longer listed as a CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment. Mr. Nishino is now the lead CEO, of course, of Sony Interactive Entertainment. So a bit of a shift. And some people, they kind of went off the deep end with it. Oh, they're letting Herman Holst go. I don't think they're letting Herman Holst go, but I do think that this is a power move in some sort of, situation where it's kind of like, hey, you haven't been doing the best job. Okay, and we have some concerns about this. So we're going to change things up. We might put you on a little bit of a shorter leash, and now you have to answer to someone instead of answering to no one as co-CEO. You now have someone directly over you when it comes to your decision making. And honestly, I think that's a smart thing. Jim Ryan, and by extension Herman Holst, really wanted to go all in on games as a service, and we have a graveyard of games as a service games that Sony was either working on or at least conceptualizing that have been canceled. Of course, there are some standouts like The Last of Us Factions 2 that I still think would have done really well, but games like Concord, of course, were an absolute failure. Destruction Derby All-Stars, the list goes on and on. Now, there are still games as a service games coming on the horizon, such as Fairbanks, which I still think is absolutely going to flop. The idea behind it is solid, but the execution doesn't really leave a lot to, it leaves a lot to be desired. Like, I don't want to play as a bunch of angsty teenage kids robbing banks, fight the power when we're supporting a billion-dollar company in Sony that's making the game. Like, it just seems very tone deaf to me when it comes to that sort of thing. But I think this will actually be an interesting shakeup because now Herman Holst, he essentially does have to answer to someone. Now, previously, he was answering to someone, but that someone kind of let him do whatever he wanted to do. And, that's why we got situations like Concord. Now, there's actually more to this story than what meets the eye, because, of course, Sony is more than just Sony Interactive Entertainment. They are, a full company, the Sony Group Corporation, as they are called. And they actually have a new CEO who was previously president, COO, and CFO of Sony Group Corporation, and that is Mr. Hiroki Totoki. A very fun name to say, Hiroki Totoki. Now, Mr. Totoki might not be someone you are super familiar with, but there was actually a quote that was floating around from, I believe it was last June, where he said some very interesting stuff as far as PlayStation was concerned. And this is kind of where the title of the video comes into play, because I feel like all of the different facets of it kind of lead up to this situation that we're going to talk about right now. Mr. Totoki said the following when talking about being aggressive and improving margins by growing first party with multi-platform. In the past, we wanted to popularize console and the first-party titles. Main purpose was to make the console popular. It is true, but there is a synergy to it. So if you have strong first-party content, not only with our own console, but other platforms like computers, first-party can be grown with multi-platform, and that can help operating profit to improve. So that is another one we want to proactively work on. I personally think that there are opportunities out there for improvement of margins, so I would like to go aggressive in improving our margin performance. And yeah, that was actually from February of 2024. Shoutouts to Genki for talking about that back in February of 2024. Now, we've already seen Sony enter the PC side of things, and initially it was pretty successful, but as time has gone on and more releases have come over to PC, you're definitely seeing a drop-off in, fan interest, especially in the single-player games. Now, games like Helldivers 2 did very well on PC, but a lot of the single-player ports that come, a year or two later, or even beyond that, don't really seem to be doing all that great in the grand scheme of things. Now, Sony has actually changed their requirement for a PSN login as of today when you're talking about playing the PlayStation games that are available on Steam. It is now an optional thing, which it used to be a mandatory thing. So that may be another way that they are trying to kind of change how PC gamers view these first-party PlayStation titles. And could this mean that some first-party PlayStation games come day and date on PC, especially single-player games? If you're trying to be aggressive with the market of your first-party IPs, then that's something to consider. I don't think you want to make every game available on PC day one if you still want to sell a bunch of consoles, but it is something that you have to put at least into the idea box. But how does this really play into the potential for Nintendo Switch 2 and Xbox to, get PlayStation games? Well, here's where things get very interesting, because if you look at the landscape, Xbox is putting whatever on anything. So PlayStation does put a game, that being MLB The Show, onto Xbox. So there is a little bit of a precedent, although that was a decision made by the MLB, not necessarily Sony. But with the Nintendo Switch family of systems, things get even more interesting because of the fact that Lego Horizon ended up coming out on the Nintendo Switch. I don't think this is something that can be understated. You could say that, you're just looking at it from a computer perspective, but Horizon is one of your biggest first-party franchises. It's something that Herman Holst absolutely loves to death, and this was a decision done by Sony to put this game on the Nintendo Switch. Now, yes, it is not a full-on Horizon first player experience style game. It is a different style of Horizon. So a lot of people just kind of wrote this off as, oh, no big deal. But I think it is a big deal, especially when you look at the words about growing your first party IPs onto other platforms. You use computers as an example, not as the standard, not as the only thing, not as the de facto thing that it's only going to be computers. You just use computers as an example. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not taking into account. We are seeing crazy things happen right now. Microsoft accounted for like 74% of software revenue during December of 2024 on PlayStation because of games like Call of Duty. Now, obviously, it's kind of diminishing Microsoft's brand, but with someone who wants to be aggressive with first-party IPs, you don't think Sony is sitting back looking at that saying, well, more people are playing Microsoft stuff and spending money on Microsoft stuff than they are on PlayStation stuff in the month of December. Now, that might just be an anomaly. That might just be an outside case. But if that's something that happens again, you have to look at that and kind of consider, maybe we do need to put some of these IPs onto other platforms. We've already started. Once you start doing something like it, think about it like Microsoft. Initially, it was just like 1 or 2 games. And then all of a sudden the floodgates came. Initially with Sony, it was just Lego Horizons. Not a big deal. MLB The Show, I'm not really going to count that because, like I said, that was mandated by the MLB. But it was just one game. It's just one game. Who cares? Not a big deal. But that's how these things start. That's how these things start. And with these inflated budgets and huge companies, you got to do something. You got to do something to make up your revenue. Because, you know, I don't know. Like, I can understand why people don't see it the way I see it. And that's fine. I think it's a little naive, but that's fine. But I think a lot of you guys are going to understand where I'm coming from with this. And I think a lot of you guys are kind of going to read between the lines of the reshaping of Sony, the new CEO who wants to be aggressive with first-party IPs, and essentially what this is going to mean for the future of Sony. Because if you have to take a while to create these first-party games, years, you know, it's hundreds of millions of dollars, and then you sell, you know, 4 or 5 million copies on PlayStation, but you could get a couple million extra on other platforms. You don't think this company is going to want to consider that at the very least? Just something worth talking about. I feel like this will be a very interesting conversation. I know PlayStation fanboys are already going to be seething at me for even suggesting this, and that's fine. I want all fanboys to hate me, honestly. I don't like just diehard fanboys of stuff. I feel like people need to have an open mind because it's video games cumulatively. You know, you have to appreciate good things from companies and not appreciate bad things from companies. And, you know, a lot of the fanboys just take whatever slop comes up their way. But if you are a fanboy and you still watch me, I appreciate you. Let me know in the comments section down below, though. What do you think about this? What do you think about this restructuring? Do you think Herman Holst is now put on a tighter leash? Because I sure as hell do. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.